What's going on? Boys, thanks to our patrons and Fiverr customers, subscribe to our Patreon free for behind-the-scenes stuff. Arm yourselves, typology stuff. Regarding that personal thing, everything's fine. We'll talk about it when I don't feel dead. On the menu today is SI Adaptive Learning. A little feature of the function I noticed a while ago, have been paying more attention to, and am now ready enough to talk about. I think it was the Michael Pierce video about ISTPs versus INTPs and the ways they learn. If you compare it to a 4X game, INTPs build wide and ISTPs build tall. Or in normal person speak, an INTP is more likely to learn a little about a lot, where an ISTP is more likely to learn a lot about a little. A description which will deeply offend both types. But you do see that in not just in ISTPs, but in NI and SE types in general. My favorite way to view this is through ENTJs. They will get into their ed and eddy bullshit of the week, but whatever they're doing, whatever they get into, they will approach it in a way that is distinctly them. Whether it is the future of irrigation or the practice of flipping collector coins. Now, SI learning and approaches are very different. Because when you're dealing with SI types, you'll see them whip shit out you wouldn't expect from them, and performed not in their quotes language, if essence can be said to have a language. If one of those ENTJs forges a sword, you will somehow be able to tell they're responsible for it. Not so much with an SI type. And this is where the distinction between this SI adaptive learning thing and FI's peculiar magic we talked about last time, that FI thing is strange because it is them, and they will have a harder time explaining how they developed this connection. It's personal, it doesn't make sense. Versus this SI adaptive learning thing, it's usually a slightly modified replication of something else they've already seen. And they'll be able to explain to you easily how they came into this ability. Because what does SI do for you as a person, as this existential survival case building function? It finds things that work for you, it places them in the hierarchy of things that work for you, and then it encourages you to do it over and over and over again because it worked before, it's working now, and the guess is it will continue to work in the future. So it makes perfect sense that an SI type would pick up tricks from other people. But the things an SI type picks up, especially if they're larger strategies, they have a weird flavor. Because this strategy they've picked up doesn't exactly feel like them. In contrast to their other SI strategies that they have developed totally independently. And these strategies they have developed totally independently are about as close to evergreen as you'll get. Why is that? I think because SI, it's not thinking about this, but it understands context. It understands the circumstances in which this habit was developed. Therefore, you know how to micro-correct your strategy for your environment. And I think that leads people to believe, or maybe it doesn't lead people to believe. To me, SI has always had this homegrown, rustic flavor to it. Homemade life strategies. And that makes you think SI is in the building, because it is a case building function. But when you when you're aware of this adaptive learning thing, either SI is not about the or strictly about the homegrownness, the developing it for yourself thing, or there are two ways to look at SI. I lean toward the latter. I think SI does have a homesteading flavor, but it's scavenger homesteading on some shitty junkyard planet. You develop your own survival methods and you're proud of them, but when you smell something that is too good to pass up on, you'll take it and figure out the rest later, which is an odd side of SI. I think that's why, in distinguishing INFJs from ISFJs, an INFJ will change who they are as a result of exposure to something, and an ISFJ will change what they do as a result of exposure to something. When SI finds a survival strategy that consistently produces results, it will absorb it even if it's unnatural to them and they don't totally understand it. Or worse, or maybe more pronounced, they don't understand the context within which it was developed. Which is one of the ways you can detect when a strategy a person whips out is not theirs exactly. Meaning, this is an opportunity for you to guess a bit at their past if they are not sharing it with you. And I think there are two primary characteristics to these adapted strategies. First, a lack of finesse when applying it. When we discussed SI a while ago, we used artillery as an example. Artillery solved the problem last time, so your enemy is coming at you with these crazy psychic soldiers and all these crazy schemes and all this shit. And to you, as an SI type, you witnessed the effectiveness of artillery, the glory of artillery, even. And instead of developing some crazy strategy to counter all the enemy's crazy shit, you'll just apply artillery and then some more artillery and then even some more artillery. And if the SI strategy is especially effective, it will carry you through situations it shouldn't. Or through situations in which, if you had developed a more tailored solution the way an NI type would, you could get through it at less expense to yourself. But because you're an SI type, you like the security of knowing your strategy works. Now, of course, you'll eventually reach a point that strategy won't work anymore. You can't apply any more of it to get over the hill, and then you're screwed. But that's a different conversation. That's when NE comes in, or maybe that's when adaptive learning comes in, that lack of finesse comes in. But let's go back to the beginning of this example. Let's say someone not involved in a military setting witnessed artillery also, but didn't have that understanding of it, so adopts it or adapts it without the finesse, and then applies it to other situations without that finesse. We need to demolish a building. The strategy adapted SI type says, let's use artillery. That will technically get the job done, but you can tell there's a lack of awareness in context. This solves the problem, but it's inefficient, and it proves you probably don't have a history or a future in construction or demolition or something like that. Like in games, you have a pocket strategy. This is something you can pull out and apply, but it's not organic to you. And then here's where you get into the more interesting side of SI adaptive learning, these strategies. Sometimes an SI type wants to evolve this strategy they've adapted into more than a pocket strategy. They're aware of this strategy's limitations as it stands, the way they use it right now, but they both smell greater consistency in the future if they can figure this out, and therefore more security. And they can also smell the fear of pulling this out and failing with it because they don't understand it on that personal level. SI feels almost like earthbending. It's all about the foundation. So the SI type begins to iterate on this strategy and tries to make it theirs. But because they didn't spawn it, they don't know what soil it came out of, or don't understand the soil it came out of, or what it's supposed to be aimed at. All they can do is their best. And that leads to interesting results. We'll go through some examples here. I spend most of my time around higher TE types. And over the last 5 years, I have started to become Mr. Organized. The trouble is, I'm not a TE type. So I've accrued a number of logistical strats, but because I'm not naturally a logistical person, I'm rarely, if ever, trying to develop logistical solutions to evolving problems. If you'll bear with me in TE speak. TE cares about logistics. I care about logistic. TE will work to build an efficient solution around a problem. I'll take these solutions I have learned from them and have worked out these are the ones reasonably most successful across however many number of circumstances, and then smash those solutions against the problems like a sledgehammer. I'm not building a logistical solution. I am trying to force order on something I don't understand based on what I have seen work for people I respect or have seen get results in the past from other problems. And that's the first leg of this SI adaptive learning, at least in my life. This is not natural to me, but I have seen this sort of thing get results enough times. I feel I need to figure out how to make it work, or I feel I need to use it, and I use it, and it works some of the time, but it's not mine. I see on that dry level what they're doing, but I don't understand it on that organic, intuitive, wet level. So what do? TI refines according to its ideas. I keep records and receipts of everything. The very first tarot reading I did on Fiverr was on April 18th of 2024, and it was a journeys spread. I can tell you from my work who talked to me about what, when, their attitude, all sorts of shit, going back 2.5 years now. That is not efficient, but that bandaging allows me to continue to perform logistics, quotes, in a way suited to me. It is not efficient, but it is organized and it does work. But once again, it is not what a natural, intuitive, high TE type would do. For them, efficiency, or what would be more efficient, would be figuring out ways to prevent needing extensive records in the first place. Or we could look at a different hypothetical example. Actually, I'll mention them both right now so I don't forget them. The vegan INFP and the friendly ESTJ. Vegan INFP. This INFP is into veganism, not just for the health reasons, but very much for the moral concerns reasons. And I'm not shitting on them for that. Despite how obnoxious vegans used to be, I think they annoyed people a lot. Well, they were annoying. It's hard not to annoy people when you're being annoying. but an additional layer to that annoyingness is I think they're right. As in, this whole sentience thing, are you self aware or are you not, seems like a convenient way to put yourself above things that do have consciousness, that do actually have egos, even if we don't, or they don't mirror our egos exactly, so we don't have to feel as bad about slaughtering them. I'll still eat a burger in a second, but uh, you have the moral high ground here. Anyway, this vegan INFP, for our example, develops an understanding of hunting techniques, or maybe tracking techniques, something along those lines. Maybe one of their parents was big into hunting, or they wanted to understand this, not necessarily other side, but additional fold of this issue they're concerned with. Because a lot of hunters, I mean, well, okay, a lot of hunters are shitty, but some hunters are on the level. And actually, understanding would be the wrong word. More like an awareness of how to kill an animal cleanly. All the different ways. Then this INFP runs into an emergency situation, either, or actually, ranch situation, your horse is all fucked up, or we could go with the apocalyptic example, it doesn't really matter. The point is, an animal needs to die for essential reasons. INFP understands how to do this in a way that is clean enough even though they wish they didn't need to. And then they do it. If it must be done, then we can do it right. And then actually, let's step a bit further into the apocalyptic side of that example. A lot of hunting needs to be done. INFP is still concerned about the animal's feelings and stress levels and dignity, even in the middle of the apocalypse. And INFP knows if other people go out and do the hunting, they'll take no care for dignity. All they'll want is to kill the thing and get its meat. So the INFP volunteers to do all the hunting, and then, out of necessity, you watch this vegan or previously vegan INFP put their ethical spin on the hunting and tracking strategies it picked up however many years ago. Because with SI, they picked up a functional, effective strategy for something that would otherwise be totally outside their field of interest or concern, or they would even be opposed to. But now that they recognize they must employ this strategy, they didn't develop it, but they will make efforts to make it their own. That is FI putting its spin on this strategy it picked up, but didn't develop for itself. Now it is developing it in its own direction for itself, but that's the other little twist. Usually when you haven't, we talked about it with my example, but when you didn't develop it for yourself, you don't understand the what or the why. All you see and understand are the results. Ergo, when you start making adjustments, you are not tuning it for its original context or for a changing problem. You are tuning it to your own sensibilities. And that'll usually still get you results. Sometimes it might even get you better results, which is a fun, interesting aspect of the introverted functions. They can get stuff you think they shouldn't, but until you secure those results, it'll always look like nonsense because it's coming from you, not from the environment or the winds of change or what have you. And then we get into our shorter example, the friendly ESTJ. I've noticed ESTJs are more effectively personable than ENTJs are. ENTJs are personable, they'll try to be personable, but they don't sell it the way an ESTJ who wants to be personable can. And I think that's all thanks to SI. SE is good at seeing and catching and apprehending. SI is better at absorbing getting saturated with and understanding over a longer period of time. And then with ESTJs, with personability, you combine that with tertiary NE. ESTJs would be hotter if they were a little bit stupider or a little more vulnerable. That's one of the weird things I've been noticing about ESTJs lately. On paper, I should prefer ESTJs to ENTJs by a lot, and I don't. Why is that? ESTJs are master generalists, and I won't say they are inherently good at the norm, but they are good at building norms. And I think that stresses me out because, through no fault of their own, as they are building norms, they are also forging chains I will probably be expected to shackle myself with at some point. I don't think that's what they're trying to do, but that's the way it usually turns out. And that makes it even stranger because I should be getting off on that, and I'm not. ESTJs are a little too hard to hurt for my tastes. I'll take the highs and lows of the ENTJs instead, because that feels more human. There's the Myrmidons are the ants from Greek mythology, right? I don't know all their stories, but ESTJs have a. It's funny because they are in men statistically the most prevalent of, or it's ISTJs and ESTJs are the most prevalent among the male types. So they should be normal, but they feel alien to me, even though I like them and I grew up around them and this and that. But back to our example, ESTJ, TE dominant, decides it would be beneficial, be more efficient, if they could figure out how to socialize better. Now, they're good at norm custom. They might even be good at niche interest custom. An ESTJ who's big into Warhammer, for instance, but they're still not good at tailoring themselves to individuals on an emotional level the way they witness other people doing. Maybe they have some high FE friends. The ESTJ watches them extroverted emotionally undress somebody and manipulate them and run them in circles and send them on their way. ESTJ says, how did you do that? How can I do that? And then they do what SI does best and not watch like that emoji with the ketamine eyes the way an SE type would, but they're around when FE shit is happening. And they develop a palette of FE probes. If FE for an FE type is like a set of organic probes, very sensitive alien organs sticking off their hands, and they can feel all sorts of things. They can feel sight. The ESTJ builds a set of tools that can mimic what those do without any of the personal emotional attachment to them, sensations of them. Then the ESTJ goes out into society with its series of probes and starts working on people. The ESTJ does not have an intuitive understanding of what they might have done wrong if they did something wrong, or how to maneuver these sorts of people in those directions. Which probes do you use? Why? They have none of that intuition, but what they do have is SI. They have a deep pool of understanding they can dump buckets and buckets of information into, until they have developed a system robust enough to mimic FE believably. If you understand cognitive functions and you're observant, not controlled by stereotypes, you can pick this up. And I don't even think it's that uncommon. I think this is what ESTJs do. It's how they control things, it's how they build these norms. It's an essential function, but like certain birds, they're born knowing how to build their nests. Humans aren't born knowing how to build a yurt, but if you're in that environment, it's something you'll need to do, so you do. I think that's a skill ESTJs need to build for themselves, using the tools they're born with. People hate them, but they are sophisticated machines. And that's all an example of taking FE's strategies into SI and then wielding them and iterating on them from a TE mindset. Because for them, I mean, I'm sure they do enjoy interacting with people, but it's more if they're using or mimicking FE in a sophisticated way, it's more about efficiency. Where even if an FE type says they're using FE in a totally cold, efficient way, FE types are weird. It's like some Michael Corleone shit. It's always personal with FE. If you have FE, maybe you can't, well, no, definitely you can teach yourself, or maybe you're born with the ability to use FE in that cold, calculating efficiency way, but you'll never, I think it, I'm willing to bet, I would bet money, even in psychopaths, you can't shake that personal aspect. Where an ESTJ, say, who develops those skills through SI can. And isn't that freaky? Psychos get out psychoed. Anyway, that is SI adaptive learning. It is a different side of SI or a different sensibility to SI. It picks up something it didn't invent and isn't especially familiar with because it gets consistent results. It's a little unnatural, but it can be made more natural to the individual according to their functions and their needs. But even when they do, it'll still be odd because it's not informed by whatever the environment that spawned that strategy was. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.